name's Carol Brose. I'm from Southern Minnesota Regional Legal Services. I'm one of the attorneys there. SMERLS is a legal aid. That means we provide free legal services to low-income people, fairly low-income people. So keep that in mind. We do pretty much any kind of a civil law case. We don't do criminal, but we do lots of different civil types of cases. And actually, the biggest number of cases that we do are in housing. So that's the topic for tonight. Does everybody have the handout? There's some more in the back if you don't have one. This is a nice overview of landlord-tenant kinds of issues. If you look at it, there's some underlines of other documents that are available on the website. And the name of the website is on the bottom of the first page. It's called lawhelpmn.org. And it is a fantastic website that's full of wonderful resources that are very written in plain English instead of legalese, so it's actually very helpful. We have one of our housing staff attorneys here. His name is Tuz Zhang, and he is going to run us through the basics of landlord-tenant law. So here's Tuz.
I'm in the housing unit, so why don't we get started by, I know some of you guys are still eating, but why don't you guys try to group up, maybe 5-6 people at a time, and try to share stories or experiences you've lived through yourself or your friends, family have lived through that was a problem in renting. What were a couple of things that have come up?
One time we were in this place and it got foreclosed on, they charged you. They were renting, they weren't paying the bank and they foreclosed on the place. We were still paying rent. They took our money and spent it on other stuff and weren't paying the bank, like the house and the
Okay, foreclosure. I wasn't expecting that, but we can talk about it. It's not that common. It was back in 2009, but not as much. A long time ago. Okay. Is there anything else that you guys came up that's pretty common?
If they have a lien on the property, they still try to rent it out.
Okay, so it's sort of the same thing: foreclosure, lien, mortgage. Okay. How about the group right here? What did you guys see as a common problem?
Not fixing repairs.
Repairs, yes.
We can't hear her. We can't hear them back here.
She said it was repair problems.
Okay,
It's
gotcha.
common.
That's a good point.
Yep. Anything else that you guys talked about?
Basically, like when apartments have rodents and stuff.
Okay, so pests, rodents, mice, rats, cockroaches, bed bugs, the worst. And I'm actually going to count that as repairs again, because as I'll explain in a bit here, that counts as a repair problem in Minnesota. How about the group here in the back?
We had a housing discrimination issue come up, where the landlord agreed to rent to one person with 2 roommates, and then when the landlord saw the 2 roommates, said, oh, it's not available, I have to go out.
Okay, so discrimination, basis of race?
Race.
Okay. Anything else from that group?
Landlord trying to charge for an improvement that probably landlord shouldn't have charged for.
Okay, so was it like they upgraded a window or something like that?
No, just a grab bar for the shower.
Grab bar for the shower.
Oh, okay. So to install the grab bar?
Yeah.
Okay. No, this is actually a modification to a unit. Okay. How about the group in the back to my right?
That's us.
Sure.
Okay. All right, thank you. One, they don't give you a lease one time. They want to put you out. 2, if you don't pay by the 3rd or the 5th, they give you an eviction notice. 3rd, when you don't pay on time, they charge you high interest. So we want to know where that money goes. Thank you.
What was the first one again? So it was.
They don't give you a lease one time until the last minute, and then they try to throw you out. Oh, you didn't sign your lease, but they didn't actually remind the people that the lease was come and do, which they should do, because if you're a tenant, you don't always know when your lease is.
So, Ms. Dorothy, is that a renewal, like you're living there and then they're giving you the new lease?
Right, but they don't give it to you on time.
Sure.
And then they tell you, oh, you gotta go, cause you didn't sign your lease.
Okay.
That's discrimination.
Yeah, I think that could fall into discrimination.
Yes, sir. Alright, and then you got the other one.
Yep, eviction
When
and
you-
late fees.
Right, late fees, they charge you all this interest, where does the money go?
Sure.
And then the fourth one, I got a fourth one.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I got a fourth one, it's important. They want you to go, they go up on the rent, but they don't do any repairs at all.
Okay.
Now, that's good.
All right. And I think my last group right up here.
Evictions, getting them off the record.
Okay.
Section 8 eviction.
Okay.
Oh, that's a good issue.
Now, section 8, you mean voucher?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
All right, so what I've got as the issues you guys have seen is foreclosures, repairs, that's a major problem, discrimination, modifications to the unit and having to pay for it, evictions, I'd probably need to add another one there, late fees, lease term, which is when they're giving you a new lease,
Okay, I have a
and then
question.
voucher, yes.
What about like, okay, so there's another instance where, say you didn't get everything out of your apartment and they charge you, even though like, say they charge you $600, but they already kept your $700 damage deposit. And they charge you for basically saying you owe them money
Mm.
on top of what they've already kept from you.
They're trying to take your deposit, girl.
Yes, so I'm gonna say that's a security
They did,
deposit
and then they
problem.
like, you owe me this on top of that. As far as I'm concerned,
Okay,
What about mid-lease increase, going up on your rent in the middle of the lease?
yeah, I'll answer that one quick, cause that's a simple one. It's a hard no. If you have a written lease and it says my rent is $950 a month, you're in a 12-month lease, you're in month 5 or whatever month you're in, and they say, actually, you know what, I think your rent should be $1,000 something, that's a hard no. You've signed a contract. The lease is a
Right.
contract. You've agreed to it, they've agreed to it. If they try to do anything like increase your rent, and it's just a standard private lease, then that is a hard no. You should not pay it. If they try to bring an eviction action or anything like that, you have a great defense.
What if they threaten you, see they threaten you with eviction with that?
then you can tell them to
Also-
take you to
And
court.
also in small print, it says, we reserve the right to go up on your rent at any time. So is that clause legal?
I'd call it highly suspect. Before, I want to read it. I'm not going to give you a solid answer, but that's very dodgy.
Okay.
The difference between a rental agreement and a lease. I think that's
Oh, sure. So that's an easy one too. Rental agreement, lease, same thing. It's basically a contract between you and your landlord saying, I am going to rent this place for X amount of dollars and X amount of time. Those are kind of the basic terms of the lease. Or a rental agreement, same deal. But I've got some good issues here that we can touch on, and feel free to jump in with questions if you guys have got them, okay? So first thing, foreclosure. So not as common of as an issue as it used to be, which is a good thing. But if you're renting a place from somebody who's got a mortgage, which is pretty common, and then it goes into foreclosure, you should still be able to stay in that unit for as long as your lease term. So even if it's been foreclosed, it got sold at the sheriff's sale, 6 months of redemption has passed, they weren't able to save the house, and it goes to the person who bought the home, your contract, your lease should still carry through to your new landlord. So your security deposit should too, but what I see all the time is, shocker, the landlord who couldn't pay their mortgage is probably just gonna keep your security deposit, and then you're stuck trying to sue them for it. So not ideal, but you should be able to stay there throughout the rest of your lease term.
So what if you are able to fulfill your lease and you think that there's a chance that maybe they won't give you your damage deposit back? How about if you pay your last month's rent, less that damage deposit?
There you go.
So you're not supposed to do that.
I know.
Yeah, the statute says you're not supposed to do that.
But they're supposed to give it back too, so.
They're also supposed to give it back, you're right. So that will move us to security deposits, SDE for short. So in Minnesota, you are entitled to your security deposit minus whatever damages. That's what it's for, right? Damage deposit, security deposit, same thing. It's there for, if you broke a handle or whatever. That's what it's there for. And when you get it back, it's a little complicated. So 2 things have to happen. One, you have to move, because you only get your security deposit back after you moved out. And then you also have to provide a forwarding address where you're moving to, or somewhere they can send you the check, basically, right? Or a letter or some kind of documentation on why they kept some money. And so once you moved out and you provide a forwarding address, that's the one that trips people up a lot. The landlord has 21 days to send either the check or the letter or a combination of the 2 to give you back your security deposit minus damages, and then or explain what those damages are. So to talk about not getting them keeping the whole security deposit and then still sending you the letter saying, hey, you actually owe me $600 for whatever damage is. It's a tricky spot to be, and where they're at is if they've already taken your whole security deposit, then they're sort of short. So what they would have to do if they're going to try to get more money out of you is conciliation court, small claims court. That's something they'd have to sue you for. On the other side of the coin, if you don't get your security deposit back and you think it's wrong because they kept it for bad reasons, like it was a 10-year-old carpet and they replaced it and they kept your security deposit for replacing the carpet, like that's normal wear and tear. You don't have to pay for that.
Right, so if you feel like you don't agree with them, how would you go about that? Would you tell them, like, basically take me to court?
If they're the ones saying you owe them money, then yes, because then the burden's on them to try to get money from you. But if you're the one that didn't get your security deposit back and you think you should get some of it back because you didn't break anything or they kept it for a bad reason, once the 21 days pass, my advice would be to send a letter first saying, hey, I don't think you're supposed to be keeping my security deposit. I didn't cause any damages. Please return it to me. Put a timeline on it, whatever you feel is appropriate, 7 days, 14, 21, a month, whatever. And then also cite the Minnesota law. And if you have more questions, I'll plug again, lawhelpmn.org has a lot of very good information that's easy to understand on there. You're entitled to damages. So you're entitled to the return of whatever your security deposit should have been, times 2.
You are supposed to clean up, and then you can take pictures after you clean.
Yes.
Because they can say, you didn't clean the apartment, that's why I'm taking $100 or $150.
Exactly.
So when you get to the court, you show the court that you have cleaned this place up and you have taken pictures. Show it to the judge.
Exactly. That's a really good point. Thank you. So my general advice is when you move into a place, take tons of pictures, like on your phone, and upload it to Google Docs or whatever. Save it on your phone, save it on a computer, upload it to the drive, the cloud, whatever.
I mean, what if you agree that, like, okay, they could keep the security deposit because you did leave some stuff in the apartment and you didn't do what you were supposed to do. So go ahead and keep that security deposit. But as far as me owing you extra money on top of that, I could.
Yeah, just sue me. Like,
so that,
do it.
could they, like, would it, like, say you're trying to get another apartment, would that pop up on your, if they, run your?
Sure. Maybe. It depends on what that new property does. If they're just calling for references, maybe. If they use a tenant screening agency, which a lot of larger landlords do, then it kind of falls into whatever that company does. But unless it's some judgment out there from a conciliation court claim, like you shouldn't be able to find it. It's not Googleable, it's not online or anything like that. It would probably just be notes in your old landlord's files.
Oh, okay.
But just to touch back on the move out, move in thing, so upload the pictures in a couple places, because if you lose your phone, which happens, right, then you've lost all your photos and then you're stuck. And then when you move out, same deal. Take a ton of pictures, keep them in a couple places, so if things come up, you can be like, hey, nah, that handle was broken when I moved in, and you never fixed it, and I told you to, you never did. Like, you want to have evidence on your side. For example, when I moved into a place a couple years ago, I took like 175 pictures. And it's, it's just on your phone. Like, it's not going to cost you a dime. So, more pictures are better. Keep them uploaded in a couple places.
When you live in an apartment and they tell you you can paint, but you have to paint it back once you move, do they provide the paint? After you live there so long, don't they have to provide you with the paint because they have to paint it anyway?
No,
No?
not if you change the paint that they had in there initially.
Well-
You chose to change it, it's not their responsibility to paint it back to
No,
where it was.
to give you the paint to paint it back.
No, that's probably, I'm going to say probably
What
no.
would you do?
But I mean, if you have to paint the apartment anyway once I leave, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, but that's your logic, that's not theirs. Okay, it's just like if you leave furniture
Okay.
and stuff in a place and you wonder why they're charging you for it, it's because that's not in the lease. They have to get somebody to come take it away and they're gonna charge you for it.
So let's see what our legal counsel says about
Yes.
this.
Yeah, so for your specific question, I'd probably say no. If they let you paint but told you you had to repaint it to, restore it back to when you moved in, then probably no.
Probably
if-
know what.
Probably know that they don't have to pay for it or provide
No,
the paint.
just provide me with the paint, because, so apartments have certain colors, you don't know where to get the paint from.
Yeah, that's probably a no on that as well. But I will note, if you're doing anything like that where they say, yes, you can do something, get it in writing.
Yeah.
I see it all the time too. It's like, oh, they told me I could repaint this wall, and then it's like, back to the security deposit, they're like, oh, we gotta repaint that wall.
Because if they give her permission to paint, she doesn't necessarily have to repaint it back to the old color unless that's required.
Yeah, so unless that's required-
Repaint it back, or they could I didn't think to ask, would they provide the paint?
Oh, I see.
Because I've been living there for years, so they have to repaint it anyway. Give you the paint and I'll paint.
It would have been nice.
Yeah, it's only one wall, but I was just asking.
Okay. Question here?
I have a question. If they had an appliance in there and an appliance were, was like, oh, when you move in,
Mhm.
or you cleaned the place up and it came down to the security deposit. Now, if I put a stove in there and I decide to take my stove with me, is it okay for them to keep the security deposit? The stove was constantly going out, so I replaced it.
So let me get it straight. You moved in, stove's not very good. You replace it out of your own pocket,
And they keep the security deposit.
and then you moved out and you took the stove with you.
Yeah.
Okay, and then they kept the whole security deposit for it.
And on top of that, it wasn't a working stove and the place wasn't clean.
Okay.
Now, when I left, I cleaned it
Mhm.
and
So
painted it as well, but I took my stove with me because I purchased it.
So two things. First, if an appliance isn't working and it was provided to you by your landlord, you should ask for them to repair it, to fix
They
it.
kept replacing it, but it, things kept happening, kept getting set on fire, or they would bring something else in there and the eye wouldn't work, or they would bring another one in there and it would just, gas, and it was just always a problem. So I replaced the stove with my own stove, and then when I left, I took it with me, but they took the security deposit.
So I'm sorry that happened. That's really unfortunate. They kept trying to fix it but never could. But my guess is that they probably kept your security deposit because there at least was a stove, and when you returned the unit, there wasn't one at all, unless you kept the old stove.
Well, no, I set their old stove in their storage, and it was like either replace the stove or die from carbon monoxide because it kept leaking. So they keep the security deposit, but you still have your stove. Now, if you choose to put the stove back in there, that's where the battle came in. You choose to put your stove back in there, that's fine. But I took my stove with me, but they kept the security deposit.
Okay.
And 'cause
That
I
might
was
be
going to
a
another
conciliation
place.
court claim then.
Right.
And so generally, like I said earlier, if you're not getting your security deposit back and you think you're entitled to it because you didn't have damages or whatever it may be, I would recommend you send a letter first saying, give it back to me or I'm gonna sue you in conciliation court, and then I can be entitled to twice my security deposit. and see where that gets you.
Do they have a leg to stand on to say, well, we had complaints? Is that different between the security deposit versus complaints from anything, from other tenants or?
Nah, complaints, you don't get charged for complaints, like that's,
Right.
those are wholly different.
So if they
Security
charge-
deposits are for security, for damages and stuff. You should never be charged for like your neighbor complained that you left something outside, like stuff like that you shouldn't get charged for. So, alright.
Just a question, was there a conversation between you and them for the fact that you were exchanging the stove, putting your own in?
Yes, it was, because the fire department had to constantly come out there because there
No,
was
I'm not
a
talking
leak.
about the fire department, I'm talking about, did you have an understanding that the person who rented you the place that you were swapping the stove?
Hence, yes, we had to have a conversation because the fire department came out, so we had to have a conversation about the stove and what the problem was.
Was there also a discussion that if you left, you were gonna take your stove with you?
Yes, it was, because I
Beforehand,
purchased
I'm
it.
talking about before you left.
Yes, because I purchased
And
it.
what did they say?
That they would take the security deposit.
So I think,
Knew that, okay.
cause there's a lot of details, right?
Right, and that, but we had a
How-
conversation
Yeah,
and they
so-
tried to say, well, we came in and we fixed it. She chose to not keep our stove and got another stove. Well, okay, the fire department came out and it kept, things
So-
kept going wrong.
Uh,
And they said they got fined every time the fire department came out.
Yeah,
They
that's
got
probably
fined.
right. So I think if the
That's
case
right.
isn't too old and you still
So-
want to follow up on it, you could call legal aid. Do you live in Ramsey County?
Yes, now I
Okay.
knew this was in another state.
Oh, this is another state. Okay. Big caveat to my advice then. This is about Minnesota landlord-tenant law, so it could be different in whatever state you were in.
Well, just for future references,
Okay.
because like
Yeah.
I said, when they got fined, it was like they kept my security deposit because they were being fined, but it was a danger, it was hazardous. So when I put the stove in, I kept their stove, and I just took mine with them, but they kept the security deposit.
But did you install their stove back in there?
Yes, ma'am, I put their stove back in the place and cleaned up the
Okay.
unit myself, plus painted it.
That's right.
But they kept the security deposit.
So just to wrap up on security deposits, do you guys have any other questions about it?
Just, does it sound to you like if this had happened in Minnesota, and she left the apartment just like she found it, with the stove that was there when she moved in Minnesota, they would have had to give you back your security deposit.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
This is because she replaced, okay, she got a question?
Yep.
Okay, now I live right across the street over here, and they got cameras and stuff. They just got cameras, people coming in and out. We had like 4 break-ins in the garage, and we go tell them, they want us to go through our insurance. They want us to go through our insurance, how come and that's supposed to be a security billing.
Yeah, so I'm sorry that happened, that there's been break-ins at your property there. It's never a good experience. In terms of your legal rights there, I mean, it's good that they have some cameras. You could ask for more, but
But they don't be on all the time.
yeah, and
Right now, they,
and you probably can't make them get more cameras or turn them on all the time. My general advice is you should get renter's insurance if you're renting. It's like pretty cheap, like 10, 15 bucks, and it has pretty good coverage. And so, but in terms of, your stuff being stolen, it's probably not your landlord's
okay, well,
responsibility.
I got rental insurance,
Okay.
but not in the garage.
Oh,
That's
Garage.
not in the garage.
yeah. You should try to see if you can get another policy.
Not over there.
I think you had a question first?
One more question, late fees.
Late
When
fees.
when you're a part of a property management and they switch to somebody else, and the new property manager is charging you late fees on something the old property management failed to disclose or didn't charge you for,
Mhm.
do they still have the right to charge you from before they took over the property?
Let me put a pin in that, because late fees is one of the things we want to talk about tonight, and see if this is a question I can answer quickly. If not, we'll cover late fees.
So you're gonna get back to that?
Yeah, I'll get back to late fees, because that is something that people have a lot of problems with. Ma'am, you had a question? All right, so sure, yeah, I'll address the late fees then, unless you wanted to ask your question. No? Okay, so late fees. First things first. In Minnesota, your late fee is capped. It is the absolute maximum is 8% of the amount owing. So it doesn't matter what your lease says. If the lease says $50, but you were short, 100, then it's $8. Okay, 8% of the amount owing.
That's the most they can charge.
That is the absolute most that they can charge. Okay? So that's an important detail because a lot of landlords have no clue about that. I've talked to landlords and I would send them the law. It's very explicit, 8%. And they're like, oh. And then
So where does that money go?
they just keep it.
Oh, okay.
That's just a penalty that's built into the lease.
8% of what?
The amount owing. So typically we argue, yeah, it can be a lot if you have a big rent. We argue, and it's not super clear, is it's 8% of that month. And so if you miss your whole month and your rent's $1,000, it's $80. And people who are good at, have good leases, landlords that know what they're doing, their clause about late fees will just say 8% of the amount owing. They'll mirror the actual law. But a lot of them, at least half of them, do say something like $50 or $75. And so that's where things can get fuzzy. And I argue that if you have $1,000 in rent and it's 8% cap and you haven't made it and they charge you a late fee and it says 50, then 50 is the actual max, not 80. Because you can only charge whatever the lease says, unless the lease says more than 8%, because then the statute should control. Okay? Any questions, follow-up questions about late fees? Because I know it is a common problem. I've got a case about it right now. I'm going to send a very nasty letter. Okay? So we talked about foreclosures. Repairs is a big one I do want to address because everyone has repair problems. Brand new Section 42 properties, they have repair problems. So repairs is a big category. It encompasses leaky faucets, cockroaches, any kind of bugs or insects, mice, messed up stove, anything that needs to be fixed falls into a repair. Weirdly enough, you could also, because the laws are written weird, like privacy, like if your landlord's stopping in without giving you notice, you actually bring a rent escrow, which is typically a repair case, to enforce that as well. But repairs is broad. Basically, any problem that can be fixed about your physical unit is a repair problem. And in Minnesota, it is the landlord's duty to make repairs to keep your unit in a reasonable condition and keep up with the health codes. And so one thing I'll plug Smurls is if you're income eligible, you can call Smurls and they'll do all the math for you. Serious repair cases Smurls takes. So generally that means, for me, mice infestations, bedbug infestations, other serious repair problems. Heaters I will touch on too, which is a big deal, especially here in Minnesota. There's like a special category of repairs, emergency repairs, that Smurls also prioritizes. So if you're eligible, give us a call. And emergencies qualify for like basic life stuff. So no water, no heat, no hot water, no bathroom facilities. If any of those things go wrong, you literally don't have it, you should definitely call Smurls as soon
What
as
about
possible.
ceiling
Leaks?
leaks? Ceiling and leaking on your bed.
Probably not an emergency unless you think it's gonna cave in, but that's very like fact intensive. But go ahead and call Smurls anyways, because most leaks can be a problem that we can help with.
Busted pipe.
Yes, busted pipes.
So if it's say it's the winter time and a pipe is busted, but the pipe, so that the pipe is old and it should have been replaced, or something like that, or the washer that goes around something, or however it may go. So if the pipe is busted, are they entitled to put you in a hotel if your pipe is busted and your house is flooded?
We argue that every single time. So when I have emergency cases, most often it's no heat, like the heater goes out because it's negative, 30 outside, the heater can't keep up. I send very nasty letters saying you need to put them up in a hotel or alternative unit, because some places have enough, units that can put you in another one. within 24 hours, or we're gonna file an emergency tenancy case. And so definitely, if you have those kind of emergency situations, our intake cards are on the back table. Please take one, because those are cases that we want to take.
And we need you on speed dial because they seem to,
It
if you
happens, I
don't
know.
know that they will just ignore it, and then you end up finding someplace to go on your own or.
Yeah, and then so just quick on that, if you're having that situation, you can't get to the courthouse fast enough and you can't reach your landlord fast enough, and you're staying in a hotel or buying food because you know, whatever it is, keep track of all your costs, and you can try to ask for it later. Sometimes that works. Just to talk about the other types of repair problems, in the general, very like end of the road remedy in Minnesota, the way to get the repairs done is a rent escrow action. So it's like a special type of court case that you can file against your landlord to make them do repairs. And so it's there's a bit of a process, and I'll touch on it. So first thing, there's whatever repair problem. You should make a written request to have it fixed and ask them to fix it within 14 days. Law Help I'm In's got some sample things that you can use. Homeline, which is another organization in Minnesota that helps with landlord-tenant issues, has a form letter that you can use to fill out and send to your landlord. Keep a copy for yourself. And then once you make the written request, 14 days, if it hasn't been fixed by then, you don't have to, but you can file the rent escrow action. There are documents at Law Help MN that help you do that. There's a form that you can use. And then
What's there? I'm sorry. The rental what?
the rent escrow action.
Can you explain what escrow means?
Yeah, so escrow, which is a fancy legal word, I'm sorry, is basically putting your money somewhere else instead of paying it to your landlord. So in the rent escrow action, instead of paying rent to your landlord, you deposit it with the court. And the court holds on to it during the case. Okay? And that is, my advice is that should be the only time you don't pay your rent to your landlord. A lot of people get in big trouble by withholding their rent because they haven't fixed the leaky washer. Like, it happens, I get it. But in Minnesota, it's much better to pay your rent and then follow the rent escrow path, as opposed to holding onto your rent and waiting for your landlord to file an eviction.
So the action you take against the landlord is called exactly what?
Rent escrow.
Is that a form?
There's a form. You can, Law Help MN, which is that website I keep talking about, the website's put on together by organizations like my own. And in one, not the paperwork we brought today, but on the website, in the How I Get Landlord to Make Repairs document, in there is an affidavit you would fill out to file the court action. The court also has its own forms that you can use. And then also, if you're talking about filing with court, you can, if you qualify, you can have the fee waived. Yes.
So rather than paying your person who you're renting from, you can fill out the paper and send your money to rental escrow.
It's the court, yeah. It's not like
Well, I know you said that, but rather than, if they don't repair, I'm just saying, they don't repair, fill out the information from the website, then send your money to renters escrow. Are you saying that?
Yes, 14 days have to pass from when you make a written request to fix it first. So 14 days pass, and then you file
And they
it
didn't
with the
fix
court.
it. So then you fill out the paperwork,
Yep.
and you send your money to renters escrow.
Yeah, it's not like a person or a place. You deposit it with the court. Rent escrow is the name of the case. It's the case type. But
Is it a certain amount of money you send?
it's your whole rent.
The whole rent, okay,
Yep.
gotcha. That's good to know.
Yeah, and so there are forms on that website, and there are also forms at the courthouse. I think it's called the affidavit for rent escrow action.
Yeah, okay.
But then, where do you send it?
You typically, unless you want to e-file, which you have to sign up and register for, you just do it at the courthouse. And so you submit your affidavit. Yeah, you do it yourselves. You go to the courthouse in Ramsey County, it's room 170. The paperwork's there, and then, yeah, courtroom, or it's not a courtroom, but it's room 170 at the Ramsey County Courthouse. It's on the first floor. That's where the paperwork is. That's where you would file it, which is a fancy word of saying turn it in. And then you also give them your rent at that same time.
very, very interesting.
And the clerk's
I
there
like
will
that.
help you with the paperwork.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's really to start a paper trail, if anything.
Yeah, and also in this whole process, so when you make a written request, keep a copy for yourself, because that's your evidence that on this day, September 5th, I said you needed to fix my stove. That starts the 14-day clock, so that's important to keep track of. Easy way to do it, take a picture and then, save it, text it to somebody so they'll have it as well. So keep multiple copies. And then you'll want to take evidence, take pictures of whatever it is that's not getting fixed, because that's, when you file the court case, you become the plaintiff. So you're bringing the fight to your landlord, which is a better situation than holding on to your rent and then them filing an eviction against you, because then you're playing defense.
So this goes for apartments and like a house you're in?
Yep, any kind of rental. Yep. You could rent a mansion on Summit Avenue. If you're renting, rent escrow is the way to get your stuff fixed. But yeah, keep track of evidence. That's going to be important, because you're bringing the fight to your landlord, and so it's your job to prove up that they are not doing their jobs. Okay. And then for serious cases, call Swirls, and also they can also give you guys advice over the phone as well about the rent escrow process, because I know this is kind of a brief thing. So more information online, and you can always call Swirls if you're eligible. Any other questions about repairs? And I guess the end of the road for repairs in the whole court action, the rent escrow action, is you have your day in court, you prove it up at an evidentiary hearing that your landlord is not fixing stuff, and then the court can order them to make the repairs, and it's a court order as the force of law. The court can also take possession or ownership of the home away and place it in an administratorship, which is a fancy way of saying the court will appoint someone to hire the contractors and do all that kind of stuff, and the money that costs to do that is like a lien, or I can't remember if it's a lien or not, against the property itself. And so the court has a lot of powers to get it done. So that's why it's the end of the road. Question here?
So until you having issues with the landlord, just about basic things, and he decides to tell you, well, I just want you to move. You pay rent, but he's choosing to break your lease. Do you have to move, or can you stay there and wait until they actually take you to court to fight it?
So if you're in the middle of a lease term and you're current on rent and there's no other problems,
And they're just asking you to move.
you don't
But they threaten to evict you and have the sheriffs put you out. You paid rent already, but they're asking you, they're saying, well, I want you to break your lease, I want you.
yeah, if they're just asking, it's an ask. You can say no. Like if you're paid up on your rent, there's no other problems with your tenancy, like you're not doing anything else that would be a problem, then you can stay. They can ask you to leave, but you're entitled to live there under the lease.
So when the sheriffs come, I can tell the sheriffs that. Or if they send them.
There'd be a lot of stuff that would happen before sheriffs show up at your door.
Okay.
And, yeah, lots of stuff will happen. Which is the next thing, which is an eviction. But I want to answer the question over here first.
So if you had like a cockroach or a mice infestation, what's considered that problem repaired? Is setting on traps enough, or do they have to get rid of the mice and not see the mice for a certain amount of time for that?
So it's, kind of use your discretion. So I mean, we live in the city, there are bugs, there's no place in the world that has no bugs. I'm like, unless you live in the Arctic, right? Like you're gonna have bugs in your unit. It's just when it becomes like a serious problem, they're in your food, you see them all the time, like that's a problem that needs to get addressed. But if you got a spider in the corner of your apartment, like that's just life. Mice, like you're gonna see mice every once in a while. Like there's probably no places that will never have mice. That's just a fact of life. But if you see mice a lot, once again, if they're in your food, they're crawling in your bed, which happens, it's terrifying. That's a problem that needs to get addressed. But generally, you'll have a gut instinct about it.
So like, it's setting on traps enough on the landlord's end.
If it fixes it, then yes. But if it has absolutely no effect, then no. The result is, has it been addressed or not? So generally though, if they're, taking efforts, if they hired an exterminator and they're coming out next week, like your 14 days pass, like you can use your judgment whether or not you want to go to court. Because going to court's not easy, but is the ultimate solution. Okay, so now I want to talk about evictions because that's the big one and I'm sure everyone wants to hear about it. So in Minnesota, there are pretty much 3 big ways that a landlord would bring an eviction action. First, and this is about 90–95% of the cases, is non-payment of rent. So it's straight up, you didn't make rent that month, and your landlord can, and they do all the time, bring an eviction action to get the unit back.
That falls under repairs, so don't hold your rent.
Yeah,
Because
that's
of
why
them
you
to pay
shouldn't hold your
repairs.
rent. Because if you withhold your rent, they'll file an eviction. I will say repair problems is a defense in a non-payment of rent case, but it's not a perfect defense. They'll, at best, the court will say pay less rent, but you still gotta pay. And if you lose your eviction because you didn't prove it up, you get evicted, and that's not what anybody wants. So pay your rent, file a lawless case. The second big reason for evictions is probably holding over. So I think somebody brought that up earlier. It's also related to lease terms, them not giving you a new lease. So a typical lease is 12 months, right? Sounds about right. So you're entitled to live there for 12 months. At the end of the 12 months, you could decide to leave. That's fine. Just tell your landlord about it on time, usually 31 days or 60, depending on what your lease says. Also read your leases, that's very important. So if you hold over, which is the fancy legal way of saying staying past the lease term. So if you're month to month, you're allowed to live there month to month. And either you can or your landlord can write out saying, hey, at the end of next month, whatever month it is, we're not gonna rent to you anymore, or if you're the one that wants to move, you can write out month-to-month leases. I'm not gonna rent here anymore, and hand it over, keep a copy. And that will end your lease term. That is a perfectly legitimate way, and that's how you should end your month-to-month leases.
So they can't break your lease in the middle.
No, you can always agree to it. You can agree to anything in your lease, generally. But if you want to stay and you have your lease and there's no rent problems, you can stay. So holding over, that's the next big one. It's very important to check your mail and read what's coming in from your landlord, because sometimes they will say, hey, we're just not going to rent to you anymore for whatever reason. And unless you suspect it's discrimination or retaliation, then you've got to move if they said at the end of your term you have to go. Okay? And then the last one is sort of breaches of the lease. So I'm sure if you guys have looked at your leases, they're 10 pages long. There's all these clauses about what you cannot do. And so if you do one of those things that you're not allowed to do under the lease, that is a reason why they would evict you as well. And that covers quite a lot of stuff. Okay, so I'll generally cover the eviction process because there is a lot of misinformation about it. So first thing I want to address, it's a myth in Minnesota, is that if you are short on your rent, or if you forgot to pay it, or if they lost your money order or something like that, your landlord doesn't have to tell you. In Minnesota, yeah, they don't have to tell you. They can just file an eviction. In Minnesota, it's not required that your landlord gives you notice of a non-payment of rent. A lot of other states don't do that. But Minnesota, if your rent's due on the 1st, second rolls around, you haven't paid it, your landlord could, and some do, file evictions.
Yeah, but you also have like a 5-day grace period.
Depends on your lease. Some leases don't have it. Yep, so read your leases. And even then, if you're at day 5, they can file right away. They don't have to call you, they don't have to send you a letter. They could see you coming in and they're sitting in the office and they wave at you. They don't have to say anything. They can just file that eviction if you haven't paid your rent. And another important thing that's a lot of people are confused about is as soon as it's filed and processed with the court, it's immediately public. So you can look it up on the court website. Other landlords can find it. And so that's why avoiding the filing of an eviction, them even starting the paperwork, is really important. Yeah?
Can they evict you in the winter with your children, even though it's no?
Yes. So, yeah, if you didn't pay your rent or you didn't go to court because you thought it was fine and they get a default judgment against you, and basically if the court evicts you and they issue out that writ, which is the order to the court or to the sheriff saying remove this person from the home, they will they will remove a pregnant woman with 7 kids in the dead of winter. Like, they will do it. If the court orders it, they will. Except on the weekends, they don't work on the weekends. But besides that, and
So what if
holidays,
you had a
they will do it.
situation to where you had to go somewhere and because you were having previous issues, you left to take care of a family, situation,
Mhm.
and they say you abandoned the unit, and they filed a report or eviction that way, is that legal? I mean, because I can tell you I was breaking my lease, I just went to handle some family, so how did I abandon the unit? When you didn't even tell me.
Yeah, that's pretty debatable. And also, I mean, you can get around that by telling them I'm just out of town and keep paying your rent. Like, that should solve that issue. So that's an easy fix to avoid kind of a rate problem. But once an eviction is filed, you go to court. If you miss your court date, they get a default judgment against you. So it's basically, if you're not there to play defense, they're shooting free throws. And they shoot 100%. So the court will issue a writ of recovery, needs the sheriffs come out, they give it to you, and they say 24 hours. So it can be pretty quick, but before that happens, you need to be served the eviction papers, which means somebody's supposed to give it to you in Minnesota between 7 and 14 days before the court hearing. They're supposed to give it to you. If they can't find you and they try a couple of times, they can mail it to you and then post it in a conspicuous place. So it's somewhere you're supposed to be able to find.
So even a slumlord can get away with just the gray area of things. Even if he just never does anything, never fixes anything, does nothing, they still have a chance of winning something, some part of it.
Yeah, I mean, repairs can be a defense in a case. It's not where you want to be, so you should, because that comes up in non-payment of rent cases. But if you're paying your rent and you're not causing any problems, then you shouldn't have any problems.
So you can get out ahead of a slumlord by, and you'll tell me if I'm wrong, because I haven't done this in Minnesota in a long time, but you can get out ahead of a slumlord by saying, I don't like the way this is broken. I don't like the way this doesn't work. I'm working with legal aid or something, and I'm paying my rent, but I'm paying it to the court, not to my landlord.
And that's
And
the rent escrow?
Escrow, and I am complaining that I don't like it. But all the money's been given, it's just I'm trusting the court to hold it. And then there's a court hearing on what's it really like in that place. Is that landlord really a slumlord? Is he walking off his job? And if the court says to the landlord, you're not doing your job, nobody wants to live in a place like that, you have to fix this and this and this, you're not gonna be charged that whole amount of rent going backwards. They're gonna give you a bunch of that money back. But you did it right by getting in front of it. You're there, you don't like it, and you just say, I'm not gonna pay my rent, then you're behind the 8 ball and they're coming after you. So you have to get in front of it.
Yeah, that's my
Because
advice.
sometimes it can be intimidating because you're the landlord and it's like, look, I don't want to get evicted. I give it to you, but you're still not fixing anything. And if I threaten to take you to court, you can make it bad for me to live here.
You are exactly right. And that's why you don't want to be doing it alone. You want to have a lawyer with you. And we have legal clinic here every other Thursday. We had it today for 3 hours. We usually have 4 lawyers here. So you have someone from Swirls, from the same place. So you want someone with you, making sure everything's done right, so you're protected from retaliation. It's hard to do it on your own. I mean, there is on the website, like the lawyer says, there is all the information, but it's complicated. And so, hey, you can have someone with you for free.
And when you don't know, they just assume, oh, they don't know anything, they're gonna deal with it or take it.
Right.
Because they don't wanna have to get kicked out, so I can just do anything.
So take one of these on your way out, which is all the dates of legal clinic. And then if you're having something like that you're just not sure, just come to the clinic. Right here, it's free, and we'll work it through with you.
Okay. So I see it's a little after 7 now, and I want to address a couple of other things that have come up. Let's see. Modification. So this was about installing grab bars in a bathroom. So if you are, so it kind of sucks. So if you're disabled, you have a physical disability, and you need grab bars or you need a ramp or something like that, that falls under fair housing law, and it falls into modifications. So making physical changes, those are modifications. And generally, you are entitled to request it. You can probably make your landlord do it, but you are generally on the hook to pay for it. So
Oh, you have to.
you gotta pay
So
for it,
you
yeah.
have to pay for any modifications in your apartment.
Generally, yes.
Okay, they tried to make me pay for it until they asked me what was my disability, which they shouldn't have. I thought that was under, HIPAA, area privacy.
It gets pretty complicated when
But
it gets to
they
the
end up paying
asking
for it
about this
themselves.
one. So that's good, because a lot of people are confused about that too. Because generally, modifications, physical changes, the tenant is responsible for, including returning it to its original state when you move out. It's not great. It's not the best thing ever, but that's what the law is. But like you've experienced, or whoever you know experienced, landlords are confused too, and so sometimes they will cough up and pay for it. But generally, you're on the hook for that. It's not great, but that's what the federal law is. Briefly, just on accommodations, which is a change to a rule or a policy or something like that. So if you're disabled and you need like a spot that's closer to the door, that's an accommodation. That doesn't cost you anything. And it's a bit complicated to get there. You can call Swirls for help, but you can request it saying, I have a disability, and I need to be closer to the door. Please assign me a spot. They should grant that. Okay, that's a common one that I see a lot. And then one last thing I want to talk about, voucher evictions. So if you have a Section 8 voucher from a housing agency, so St. Paul PHA, Dakota County CDAs, other CDAs, Metro HRA, you have a housing voucher that helps pay your rent for you, and you have an eviction filed against you, call Smurls or whatever legal aid, because those are priority cases for us.
Even if you're not paying your part of the.
Those are really tough. If it's straight up you didn't pay your rent, you don't have much to work with as a legal defense or arguments, but we try. We try our best.
You're right.
Yeah.
So about like the not paying rent, what happened with my situation is I was working, and it came time for my renewal, and they took the pay stubs from when I first started my job. I was getting like overtime, 40 plus hours a week.
Okay.
And by the time my renewal came around, I had down to part-time.
Okay.
I was contacting my section of my Metro HRA worker on a regular basis, and it was failure of communication from his part to adjust my portion of the rent. And with other bills and such like that, I was unable. It was a big.
So that's complicated, because I'm
Yeah.
sure you experienced that. Basically, you should call us about that. Okay, those are cases that we generally take on.
Okay.
Okay, so that's why I wanted to touch on voucher evictions, because having a voucher is a big deal. It helps you pay your rent. You pay 30%. And so it makes everything affordable so long as you can find a place that accepts a voucher. And also, if you are at risk of losing a voucher for whatever reason, that's also something you should contact Smurls about. Okay? Discrimination. That's the last thing I want to touch on briefly. So, as I'm sure everyone knows, it is illegal, it's prohibited. You cannot discriminate on the basis of race, gender, religion, national origin, color, and then sexual orientation in Minnesota. So if you suspect any of that, either because you were denied into a place or they won't renew your lease, basically if they're doing anything negative, anything bad to you, and you suspect it's based on one of those reasons, they're a little tough to prove, but that's something that you could contact your legal aid about to help evaluate. Yep. So any questions about any of the topics I've covered or anything I might have missed? I know Pastor said if something was missed, you could contact Randy here, but I'll give myself one last chance to answer any questions. Yep.
Right here, property tax. So when you get that thing around tax time.
Oh, the CFR certificate of rent paid.
Yes.
Yeah, so you should get that. I can't remember the timing of it all. I don't remember the timing of how it all works. I think you're supposed to get it by April. But if your landlord's just dropping the ball and they won't give you it, you can contact the Secretary of State office. office, they're the people at the Secretary of State or it's Department of Revenue. They have a form that you can fill out yourself to certify that you're paying rent. So that's like the workaround if your landlord's just not doing their job.
May I just make a comment about section 8? You know,
Sure.
I have a relative on it, and you really have to follow their instructions. One, you pay your rent, and you pay it on time. Because when they start talking about you, they can make you lose your voucher.
Yes.
So, yeah, my sister lost her voucher for a while. And then if you're supposed to be in there by yourself, don't take no partner. Be in there by yourself, cause they will, take your voucher if you got somebody else in there besides you and your children. I thought I would tell y'all that.
Yeah, so
You
that's
usually lose your voucher.
Yeah, that's one of the big ones that we see all the time. We call it unauthorized occupant. If they're not on the voucher with you, then they cannot live there.
They can't be there.
Yeah, so they can't live with you. You can add them onto the voucher, it's a bit of a process, but unless they're all listed on the voucher,
Make them go home.
they cannot live with you. They will definitely take your voucher.